Before the Hays Code ruled Hollywood with an iron fist, there was the wild, unrated world of pre-code cinema. But even these daring films could not outrun the censors forever. These are the shocking pre-code movies that got censored after their release. Scenes were cut, endings rewritten, entire plots changed. Let's uncover what they never wanted you to see. The Bitter Tea of General Yen, 1933. Frank Capra was no stranger to controversy, but The Bitter Tea of General Yen crossed a line even his defenders could not ignore. Released in 1933, the film was one of the first major Hollywood pictures to directly portray an interracial romantic relationship between a Chinese warlord and a white American missionary. That alone made it a target. Capra's film was visually daring and emotionally provocative. The tension between General Yen and Megan Davis burned beneath the surface. But what truly shocked censors were the dream sequences. In one unforgettable moment, Megan imagines being ravished by a primitive version of Yen, complete with racialized imagery and overt sexual implication. Critics called it dangerously erotic. Church groups called it a moral disaster. The backlash came quickly. Some theaters outright refused to screen the film. Others demanded that Columbia Pictures cut the dream sequence entirely or trim it into incoherence. Later re-releases softened the racial themes and attempted to play up the tragedy instead of the attraction. What had once been a bold and sensual drama was neutered into a sad diplomatic romance. Though critically reappraised today, General Yen was a commercial failure. The censors had struck hard. Capra himself admitted he was disillusioned by the reaction. The public was not ready, and the studios learned fast. Interracial desire was a line that could not be crossed again for decades. Babyface, 1933. It is one of the most notorious pre-code films ever made. Babyface didn't just flirt with controversy, it strutted into the lion's den. Barbara Stanwyck plays Lily Powers, a hardened young woman who literally sleeps her way to the top of a New York skyscraper. Each man she seduces takes her one floor higher in the corporate ladder. The original version was devastatingly blunt. Her father pimps her out. A black Nietzsche-quoting friend tells her to use men before they use her. Lily becomes a manipulative icon. But once word got out about the content, moral watchdogs and religious leaders exploded in outrage. The Hays office forced Warner Brothers to recut the film before it could go wide. Entire scenes were replaced. Dialogue softened. The ending was altered from bleak realism to a forced redemption. Lily now tearfully renounces her lifestyle and chooses love over money. It was a Hollywood lie pasted over a gritty truth. But here's the twist. Decades later, the original uncensored cut was found in a film vault labeled "For Archives Only." That version revealed how brutal and unflinching Babyface was meant to be. It premiered at the Museum of Modern Art in the early 2000s to stunned audiences. The censorship had tried to erase Lily's power, but history gave her the last word. Redheaded Woman, 1932. Jean Harlow's laugh was contagious, but her character in Redheaded Woman was no joke. She plays a secretary named Lil, who sleeps with her married boss Rex, his home, seduces his father, and ends up living lavishly in Paris. All with a smirk, all without punishment. That did not sit well with censors. The original script went even further. But before release, the Hays office demanded cuts. Dialogue was rewritten. A scene where Harlow brags about her lovers was trimmed. Foreign censors weren't as forgiving. The film was banned in the UK outright. Ireland followed suit. Studio edits tried to soften her image by the final reel, but audiences knew better. Lil got away with everything. Even with cuts, the film caused panic. Critics warned it encouraged immoral behavior. Studio memos show frantic attempts to add moral counterweights, but Harlow's charisma made it impossible to hate her. The audience was on her side. That terrified the watchdogs. The movie's edited version still sizzled, but its censored moments revealed the boundaries of pre-code freedom. Lil didn't get punished, but the studios did, with tighter scrutiny that would haunt their next projects. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. It was banned in the UK until 1958. In the United States, it was gutted by regional censors. Island of Lost Souls was science fiction horror with a savage heart, and nobody was ready for it. Adapted from H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, This film starred Charles Laughton as the Mad Doctor experimenting on animals to turn them into humans. The results were horrifying. Mutated man-beasts, screaming jungle hybrids, and the infamous Panther Woman, whose presence hinted at cross-species lust. American censors objected to the violence, but what truly shocked them was the sexual subtext. Moreau's plan to mate his Panther Woman with a human man crossed every boundary. Scenes implying bestiality were demanded removed. Some prints had entire conversations cut. Even the grotesque makeup was toned down in reissues. In England, it was deemed blasphemous and repulsive. It did not screen legally for over 2 decades. Wells himself hated the adaptation, but for horror fans it became a forbidden treasure. The censorship only increased its legend. What was once too dangerous for polite society is now recognized as a landmark in horror storytelling. Tarzan and His Mate, 1934. This wasn't the Tarzan you saw on Saturday mornings. Tarzan and His Mate was the most sensual film in the jungle adventure genre, and one of the most censored movies of the entire pre-code era. The trouble started with a single scene, a breathtaking underwater ballet featuring a nude Jane swimming beside Tarzan. Maureen O'Sullivan didn't actually do the scene herself. A body double swam the role in full nudity, filmed with poetic elegance. But when the footage reached censors, they saw only scandal. Naked flesh, sexual freedom, nature unbound. Studio heads panicked. Even after the film was released, complaints poured in. Churches and parent groups called for boycotts. MGM quickly re-released the film with the scene cut. Some prints had only brief glimpses, others removed it entirely. Dialogue was reworked, the romantic dynamic was muted. Later, Tarzan films would never again touch the sensuality of this one, but for decades, fans whispered about the lost version. In the early 2000s, restored cuts surfaced showcasing the full swimming sequence. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece of erotic cinematography. It wasn't vulgar, it was art. But censors had already done the damage. Tarzan and His Mate became a victim of its own beauty. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Based on William Faulkner's Sanctuary, this movie walked straight into a moral firestorm. The Story of Temple Drake starred Miriam Hopkins as a Southern socialite who was abducted, assaulted, and forced into a world of vice. The source novel was considered unfilmable. The studio filmed it anyway, and paid the price. Scenes depicted implied rape, implied prostitution, and psychological trauma. Hopkins delivered a performance that was raw and haunting. The original cut included moments of horror and ambiguity that made audiences squirm. Critics attacked it as indecent. Religious leaders demanded it be pulled. Under pressure, Paramount trimmed the film for re-release. Temple's resistance was edited to appear more immediate. Dialogue was rewritten to clarify her purity. Even her courtroom confession was softened. The goal was to make her a victim, not a woman making complex choices. Ironically, the censorship only muddled Faulkner's themes. The ambiguity was gone, but the controversy remained. Some theaters refused to show it. Others demanded local edits. The film's reception helped trigger the final enforcement of the Hays Code in 1934. What they cut was more than scenes. They cut the emotional core. Number 5. Scarface, 1932. It is one of the greatest gangster films ever made, and one of the most censored. Howard Hawks' Scarface was a blood-drenched look at organized crime inspired by Al Capone. Paul Mooney's performance as the ambitious killer Tony Comante terrified audiences. The violence was shocking, but it was the film's attitude that caused real fear. Comante didn't just commit crimes, he enjoyed them. The movie had style and swagger. There was no moral commentary, no regrets, just machine guns and ambition. Censors said it glorified crime. The Hays office stepped in before release demanding edits. To secure distribution, the studio filmed an entirely different ending. In one version, Comante dies in a shootout. In the censored version, he's arrested, tried, and hanged, all off-screen. Public service announcements were added. Anti-crime title cards were inserted. The tone was diluted. Even with changes, some cities banned it outright. Others ran the censored version only. The original cut survived thanks to restored prints decades later. Scarface wasn't just censored, it was neutered. What was meant to be a wild, bullet-ridden satire of American capitalism was transformed into a cautionary tale, but the damage had already been done. Call Her Savage, 1932. Claraboe made a stunning return to the screen in Call Her Savage, but even her electrifying presence couldn't save it from the censors. The film was a whirlwind of taboo, sadomasochism, disease, scandal, and forbidden romance. It pushed every boundary pre-code Hollywood had left intact. Beau plays Nasa Springer, a rebellious socialite with a mysterious past and volcanic temper. The story careens through whippings, bar fights, attempted assaults, and even a scene in which Beau rescues a friend from a gay bar. Coded but unmistakable. Then came the plot twist. NASA's destructive urges stem from her mixed-race ancestry. It was shocking, exploitative, and racially charged. After the film's release, outrage poured in. Scenes involving sexuality and race were ordered cut or trimmed. Studio editors softened the depiction of sexually transmitted disease. One reel involving her childbirth was deemed grotesquely graphic and re-edited. A whip fight was shortened. Dialogue referencing homosexuality was stripped entirely in some regions. Though the film was a hit with audiences, it was a nightmare for censors. Foreign territories demanded heavier cuts. The film's racial subplot vanished in later versions. What remained was a cracked mirror of the original, still potent, but missing its rawest edge. Claraboe retired soon after. The film remains one of the most aggressively censored pre-code features in history. Night Nurse, 1931. Barbara Stanwyck had a way of making morality irrelevant, especially in Night Nurse. She plays a gutsy nurse who uncovers a sinister plot to slowly starve 2 children to death for inheritance money. That alone would have earned the film controversy, but it didn't stop there. There's a drunken mother, a sadistic chauffeur played by Clark Gable. Stanwyck changes clothes on camera, and in one jaw-dropping scene, she knocks a man unconscious with a bottle. The film is blunt about murder, child endangerment, and medical ethics, or lack thereof. Upon release, local boards went into overdrive. Scenes of children crying out in hunger were trimmed. Dialogue was rewritten. Gable's character originally beat a child. The scene was deleted. One infamous moment where Stanwyck refuses to treat a gunshot victim because he lacks a police report was also cut in several cities. Later reissues were far more sanitized. The medical horror was downplayed. The suggestion that nurses might act outside the law was buried. The powerful feminist undertones, a woman who saves lives, defies corrupt men, and uncovers murder, were neutered. Night Nurse survived, but only in pieces. Modern restorations hint at its original strength. The censors couldn't kill it, but they tried.